Welcome back. And in this today's topic of the day discussion, we will be discussing a very important topic, and this is with respect to the new Foreigners Act, which was recently implemented and was launched in the very first week of September. And this entire video is going to be about understanding the new act as to what was the need and why there was the necessity for a new law when we already had so many laws governing the same topic. Starting from 1920s all the way till 200s, we had a bunch of 4 different laws governing the foreigners movement to India. But still, what was the need? And this act which we are talking about, the new act, is a consolidated version which brings out a framework into a single tech enabled law governing the entry, transit, stay, movement, and also the exit of foreigners in India. So even before we try and understand the key provisions of the act as to what this act is all about, right? Let's try and understand in brief as to what was the history behind this Foreigners Act. So when we talk about the Immigration Act, and we are talking about 4 different types of act which we had starting from 1920s all the way till 2000s. So in the 1920 we had an act, specifically the Passport Act. Then followed by 1939 we had one governing the registration of the Foreigners Act, the registration of the Foreigners Act. And then in the year 1946 we had a Foreign Act, followed by 2000 we had an Immigration Act. So now the problem was only one thing, that most of the important provisions were either scattered, because we had 4 different types of acts governing one particular topic, which is the immigration. So it was either scattered or it was overlapping. Means all those important provisions may be related to how a passport has to be verified of a particular foreigner who is entering the country. Those same provisions might also be repeated in the Registration Act. And both of these things, with respect to the passport and also with respect to the registration, might have been visible or might have been reflected even in the Foreigners Act, right? So hence there was a dire need to consolidate everything, and hence came the one new rule or a one new law, which overall tries to cut down the hassles of finding all those different provisions under various acts. And also this particular new act tries to bring in more new reforms also. So let's see what are those things. So why was a new act needed? One is because we wanted the consolidation and the clarity, because most of the acts were either provisions, especially were either outdated, because we're talking about acts or provisions way back in 1920s, 100 years, century old laws, and also they were overlapping. Another important thing is with respect to the security concerns, right? In order to tighten checks against illegal entry, overstay, while speeding up the legitimate travel processes. And then data and interoperability, to bring in more interoperability in terms of how data of the particular foreigner who enters or a bunch of foreigners who enter the country is handled, and also to provide a legal basis to incorporate modern technologies like biometrics, advanced passenger information, right? So all of these things. And then to bring in more accountability, because when a foreigner enters India or a bunch of foreigners enter India through immigration, right, it is not just that they enter India just for the sake of tourism. So they come for a lot of varied purposes, like be it education, healthcare, right? So this law act tries to bring in accountability by means to record data of all those foreigners who come in direct contact with certain institutions in the country, for example colleges, hospitals, so that ultimately accountability is achieved. Then to incorporate procedural certainty, means more predictable processes in order to ensure how visas, registration, compliance and penalties and removal with respect to a particular nationalist is addressed as what this particular law talks about or the new act talks about. Now, we will try and understand each and every provision of the act. So the first one, what was it? To repel and replace all those important acts which we discussed in the first slide. Second is, it talks about the extreme power now that the government has, especially the central government, where the central government right now can designate, right? It can design or designate few airports, few seaports and few land ports as a means or lawful points of entry or exit to specific immigrants. So now a particular immigrant traveling from USA or let's say Japan, now the government gets to decide which airport this particular person has to check in and which airport from which he has to exit the country, right? So now the sole power is lying with the central government, and this is one important thing from the act. Then is the creation of a body, Bureau of Immigration, which overall takes care of the entire immigration functions of the country, where talking about its core functions, it starts right from visa issuance, endorsements, extensions of a particular person's stay, all the way till how his entry, transit, stay, even for that matter, how his internal movement takes place and even his exit takes place. Everything is regulated by the Bureau of Immigration. And also operating tech systems like e-visa platforms, biometrics, and even issuing standard operating procedures to field units across the country is what being taken care by this Board of Immigration. So key important thing from this slide is the designation or the important power vested in the central government to notify a specific immigration point for an immigrant. And then second is the creation of the Bureau of Immigration, most important. And then third is the registration of the foreigners with one of the another body, FRRO, which is the Foreigners Regional Registration Office. So now any foreigner who enters India must is the word, must and should register with the Foreign Regional Registration Office within the time and manner prescribed after arrival. So this is also another important thing, either the FRRO or the FRO, Foreign Registration Office. Then comes the reporting obligations, because now although few personals are registered under the FRRO, right, but doesn't mean that they are left loose to do whatever they want in the country. Let's say once they enter the country, the registration is done. Now all the places they visit, the next point of contact of this foreigner in the country, wherever he goes, right? Maybe let's say for example he is a student who comes to India to study, right? So now an accountability, in order to ensure accountability, a reporting mandate has been created amongst the third party institutions like your hospitals, for example, even your educational institutes, even like schools and colleges, right? Now, even they should also create a database of all those foreigners who got registered or enrolled within them to ensure that accountability is ensured and maintained. And also this applies to all the carriers also, including the airlines, the shipping and other means of land carriers, passengers, who travel or all those commute, the carriers especially, right? Even it extends to them as well. Then it talks about the offenses and penalties also. Earlier it was not clearly, of course it was clearly defined, but now it clearly states that for those particular person who is traveling without a valid passport or a visa, right, who's entering India, right, a nationalist or a foreigner entering India without a valid passport or a visa or a prescribed document by the government of India, will invite 5 years, up to 5 years of imprisonment, and also a fine up to 5 lakh rupees, and even in certain circumstances, even both 5 years imprisonment and even 5 lakh fine. And also it is clearly defined few other offenses, like for example, giving fake documents, right? Overstaying their particular limit, what has been prescribed, right? So all of these things are even being put under this. Then it even extends the power of arrest, search, and seizure to the police department. And now it says that an officer equal or above the rank of head constable can make an arrest even without a warrant. So this is also another important provision which has been brought by this particular act. Now when you see all of these things are being tried to make sure that India, from the India's perspective, so all of the provisions that we read was for the safety point of view of the country, but now also in order to make sure that the voice of the foreigner is also heard, there is another important provision which we will discuss, that is the availability of due process and safeguards even for the immigrant, like even for the foreigner, right? Because even his voice also has to be heard, right? Even he should be given an opportunity to be heard, or even for a trial. So hence even it even extends to a point where even a consular access is also made given to that particular person, and it clearly states appeals and review. The framework typically provides for appeal or review to higher authorities, committees within set timeline. So hence even biggest of the biggest decisions, like even for example deporting a particular nationalist or particular person, a foreigner, right? So at such kind of extreme decisions, even the person is made an opportunity is made for the person to be heard, right? So this is also another important provision which has been added in this particular act. And also this even extends certain authority to the local civil authority to even ban few foreigners, right? Put a temporary ban or a permanent ban to foreigners to certain premises, right? In the view of that, let's say in the purview that it is going to obstruct the security of that particular region, or it is going to affect the public order or public health. On that virtue, on that note, even the civil authority can ensure that it can put a temporary ban or also a permanent ban for foreigners in order to not visit that particular premises or place. So even this is also another important provision. Now, last but not the least, administrative and tech backbone. As we discussed, this not only tries to make the immigration process more secured for the country, but also make sure that integration of tech is also happening. So a legal base is also being provided in order to incorporate biometrics, electronic travel, authorization, API, PNR, and interagency information sharing. So that is also another important thing. And also it is ultimately trying to create a standardized form of how these things are to be taken care or processed in the country, so that the uniform procedure, right? A uniform procedure stays in the entire country in order to standardize the entire process. Okay, so that is all. But also at the end of the day, even these implementation has few hurdles that it needs to take care. One is the capacity, and in terms of capacity, we are talking about having more number of trained officials in terms of staffing, okay, and also even in terms of building more infrastructure, because we're talking about creation of the FRROs, right? And also talking about all such places, land, air, sea, the seaports, even your airports, where we are talking about creating that database, right? So sufficient technological infrastructure and also the physical infrastructure is also very much required. So it is important that the government also tries to address that particular issue as well. And then, since we are talking about collecting the database of all the foreigners who enter the India, so even data governance is another important thing to ensure strong privacy and security is maintained, and purpose limitation for personal and biometric data means we are collecting data of all these foreign nationals, and also it is very important how a personal data of a particular person is treated, right? So hence we also should invest in building a strong infrastructure in terms of how privacy of that individual is not breached, and also we have to work or bring more reforms in terms of cyber security so that data breach won't happen. Followed by clarity for travelers, means it has to be simple, multilingual, because all of these new procedures or new act, whatever we're trying to bring, it has to be made sure that it is multilingual, because a foreigner who's entering India doesn't necessarily mean that he knows English, right? So hence all the modules that, or the provisions with respect to whatever we are discussing or the act holds, it has to be made simple. Multilingual guidance also has to be incorporated, and online status tracking, predictable timelines, all of these things to ensure that not just the travel but also the stay of that particular person, even in terms of how he has to comply with the rules of the country, is smoothly happening, is what is important to be taken care of. Then is burden on universities and hospitals, because we also are talking about certain important mandate which has been created on the universities and the hospitals to create a database of all those students or of all those people who they admit, right? So hence a huge burden lies on these institutions. So hence government should help them to build compliance tools and helplines to avoid paperwork bottlenecks. Then humanitarian safeguards, because we're talking about stringent punishments, even in terms of how even a simple, or let's say an issue with respect to giving fake documents, or even a person who is overstaying his particular prescribed time limit, right? And let's say the punishments are very stringent. So hence even these kind of punishments, although it is stringent, it also has to be ensured that especially for students or patients or even minors who are staying in India, so on a humanitarian ground, certain restrictions or let's say certain relaxations has to be provided, is what the one of the angle of this particular act which the government has to keep in mind. Then the center state coordination, which is absolutely important. So in order to ensure that a smooth division of tasks, quick information flow happens, a proper center state coordination is very important, which is also pretty much expected to happen in the coming days. In the end, the act, as we all have studied, it tries to modernize how India treats its immigration, and also it has tried to merge four huge statutes, right, which was pretty much scattered, and now it has clearly clarified each and every powers of certain authorities, even starting from the civil authority, even giving more powers to the central government, right, and also even to an extent where the power of the local police constable, police people have also been extended, right? So all of these things have been made or amalgamated, or they've consolidated in a manner which ultimately is going to be very good for the country, provided if this implementation happens properly, because anything and everything, the implementation is the ultimate key. Because if implemented with strong data safeguards and user friendly processes, it can tighten security, reduce overstays, and speed up legitimate travel, which is also a necessary upgrade for a high traffic, high growth economy like India, right? So that is all for this particular video. I hope you have pretty much understood what the new Foreign Act is all about. Now, we will solve one prelims question even before ending this video. The question goes, with reference to India's new consolidated immigration law, consider the following statements. It replaces the Passport Act 1920, the Registration of Foreigners Act 1939, Foreigners Act 1946, and the Immigration Carriers Liability Act 2000. Police officers below the rank of head constable are empowered to arrest without a warrant under the Act. Educational and medical institutions have reporting obligations concerning foreigners under the Act. Which of the statements given are correct? So use the comment section to leave your answers out. And that's all for this particular video. I hope you have liked the video. So for more such informative content, please do subscribe to Believers IAS YouTube channel. Stay tuned. We'll come back with another wonderful video. Signing off, this is Madan Gopal. Have a beautiful day.